All right. All right, Leonard, type in the chat when we're live. That way we know. Live? Okay. Thank you for joining us today on KRTD Politics. On the KRTD Media Network, here with us today, we have Kerri Barber from Digital Liberation Media Front, Madelyn Hoffman, the former New Jersey U.S. Senate candidate for the Green Party this election cycle, and the Falcone General from the Falcone General YouTube channel. So everybody's aware of the events that happened this Wednesday, 6th, and some of the most crazy events probably we've ever seen. I think it's the first time that U.S. citizens have actually stormed the Capitol. We're going to take a look at one of the videos from Leonard. If you could pull up the video from Group 1. One of the bottom 3 videos, and we're going to take a look at one of these graphics.
Just a quick update from the DC Fire Department. We're hearing that they have responded and transported at least 2 to 3 people with injuries, and that they are now looking into reports of shots fired at the Capitol now. Let's bring in Nancy Cordes, who is still on Capitol Hill. Nancy?
And Nora, the House Minority Leader, Republican Kevin McCarthy, confirmed just a few minutes ago that shots have been fired inside the Capitol building. He didn't say by whom. It's not clear whether he knows by whom, but multiple reporters have said that they've seen at least one person being carried out of the Capitol on a stretcher, covered in what appeared to be blood. So, we don't know if that was a protester or a police officer. Obviously, this is a completely fluid event. And take a look at this. This is the crypt of the U.S. Capitol. And what you're looking at is essentially hand-to-hand combat between Capitol police officers and these protesters who appear to be trying to storm that area of the Capitol as police officers try to keep them back. That area is called the Crypt because it was originally designed to be the final resting place for George Washington before he decided that actually he would rather be laid to rest at his beloved Mount Vernon. But it is an area on the first floor of the Capitol, and I'm just speculating here, but it's likely that police were trying to keep the protesters out of this area because there are spaces in the bowels of the Capitol where lawmakers can be taken to be kept safe. And police probably didn't want these protesters getting any closer to the basement of the Capitol than they already were.
Okay. So what we saw there is, I think, is extremely unacceptable. It's illegal. I think it's unheard of in U.S. history for that to have even happened. I think last time we even had anybody storm the Capitol, I think it was the British, and I think it was in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
1812.
No, you're correct.
1812.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're finding all these people. I think all these people need to be prosecuted. I think it's ridiculous that they were even able to get through. If this was a different group of protesters, if this was people protesting for racial justice or anyone on the left protesting for anything, or that was not this, they would have been arrested. They would have been shooting at them. This is not the reaction that would have been had if this were Black Lives Matter or if this were any other kind of racial justice protest. The reaction would have been more aggressive. They never would have got to the Capitol to begin with. And it's one of the failures of our police system here.
Well, Shane, if I can, it's more than just a failure. So when I was watching this unfold, like many people, I'm assuming many people who were watching C-SPAN, there were a couple things that I was looking for. One, when they first approached the Capitol building, I heard the comments from President Trump. So it wasn't unexpected that they would go to the Capitol area. What I was watching for was a legal threshold to see what they would cross. So there are a couple things. Number one, if they got into the Capitol, then that is a personal level of culpability, right? So we know that it's illegal. And I know that a lot of the MAGA folks are trying to point to the Wisconsin and the occupation of the Wisconsin Capitol. Totally different, because number one, the Wisconsin Capitol, nobody was in session and it's not illegal. Most people don't realize that protesting even on the steps of the Supreme Court now is illegal, a federal offense. So the same thing applies to our Capitol. So you can't put, the apples and oranges in. But then the other thing that I was looking for is there is a legal threshold between an angry mob and an outright coup. And the first I heard it was within the first 35 minutes of coverage. And I don't know how many people caught it, but when the news came out that Mayor Bauer had requested National Guard help and was denied by Mike Pompeo, now we hit that threshold. That was the first sign that I saw, okay, this is actually a coup. This is not just an angry mob. This is not just a bunch of people who are impassionate and breaking the law, like we saw in other parts of the country, people setting fires and whatnot, that's breaking the law. This rose to the level of an outright coup, sedition, and insurrection very quickly, and that was achieved through the insubordination and dereliction of duty of those who were in charge of keeping the security. So we heard this throughout the rest of the time that came through. Within the next hour, it became very evident that these were not failures, but these were planned in advance. And that's the difference. And I think you're starting to see that today and overnight with the charges being leveled on people is not just vandalism, not just trespassing. They are being charged with insurrection.
100%.
And I think that yeah.
And if you look, this photo has been circulating a lot on social media, a photo of cops in riot gear and, with billy clubs, standing shoulder to shoulder on the steps, several layers deep, in anticipation of a Black Lives Matter protest. This group of police were ragtag. They weren't really, I was talking to friends of mine who've been peace activists for 40, 50 years, going back to the 70s and 80s, and remembering going to the White House or going to the Capitol building rather, and seeing enough cops to encircle the entire Capitol building, and, cops shoulder to shoulder, ready to take on whatever was happening. There were, and even that night, I'll just fill this in, 4 of us went to protest in front of the offices of Senator Cory Booker and Senator Menendez here in New Jersey. We had planned it for quite some time, and it was about the inflated military budget and how we're tired of seeing Menendez and Booker vote in favor of increases in the military budget. We were met by 15 cops, 4 of us, 15 cops. So it isn't, they weren't, if they weren't prepared, I think, as Kerri was saying, it was deliberate. It was deliberate. It certainly was nowhere near the way they prepare for other rallies and demonstrations. We
have a $900 billion defense budget. So it's an overly inflated defense budget. They should have been able to control that right there, but they were complicit.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
Can I jump in on that defense budget? Because I think, again, we need to really talk about, focus on what we're talking about. So the defense budget does not necessarily cover the Capitol Police. And then, if you want to get into a larger discussion about the defense budget, we're also going to have to start talking about progressive policy like federal jobs guarantee, because we have 35 states where that is the largest employer. And is that way by design, as we have done away with industry and offshoring things. You have now forced the populace to work for companies that make tanks and widgets and everything else that goes into that material for the military budget. So we cannot even start to poke at that until we're willing to offer something else, or in
We
the
are
end,
willing
it's
to
going to be
offer
working
something else,
families.
Kerri. We are willing to offer something else. We are willing to take that money and use it to create for a universal basic income, for healthcare, for single payer universal healthcare, like an improved and expanded Medicare for all. I mean, the thinking of the billions and if not trillions since 9/11 that have been spent on that can be redirected. And just why was there $33 million in the current National Defense Authorization Act to overthrow Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela? We're talking here about
Agreed.
what we don't like. We're looking at these scenes saying, this isn't the America we know. Well, that's not what I'm saying, but a lot of people are saying that. But yet we can authorize using money to overthrow a democratically elected leader in another country.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I was one of the first, as much as I was loath to do it 2 weeks ago when Trump was talking about stimulus checks, and he went on and enumerated all of the overspend in that bill. I had to give it to him. I had to agree with him because that was unnecessary. And that, I think, goes back to members of Congress. The same members of Congress, mind you, who were sheltering in place as they were put in danger, and then still went to the Senate floor, went to the House floor, and repeated the same fallacies and outright lies about the election. So to me, it was a level of depravity of some of these members who have no qualms with watching their friends, their colleagues in Congress go through that and still step up and lie to their own constituents. So these are the people who are adding those things into that kind of budget. And also goes back to what I believe was absolutely a coup. And obviously, Department of Defense now believes the same thing with the charges coming down.
Let's
Well,
take a
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Falcone, and then we're going to take a look at another graphic.
Okay. So this is what I was told from my friend from Iraq. His name is Hakeem. He said that this was literally a meme to him because one, there's like protests in Iraq. So literally you would have every 2 weeks protests happening in Iraq where literally it would just take 3 guys to basically shoot at the crowd to make them disperse. And then they will crack a few skulls and hand out a few heavy token sentences. And he said if this was literally a peaceful, unarmed group of Black protesters, there would have been blood. And he said, God, I hate the US. And next, I also learned that literally how those people got in was literally through the cops letting them in. And next, during the Force the Vote protest, there was like over 40 people, and they had 70 cops surrounding them. And literally, you can have like people raiding the Capitol to basically give them stimulus checks or basically help them at all to get them actual aid. And it wasn't just this Capitol that they raided. Literally, anti-maskers raided grocery stores as well as other state capitals in Florida, Georgia, Kansas, and Ohio.
That was it. Let's take a look at the next graphic from the playlist Group A. It's going to be the first video in there. We're going to take a look. This is from them, I believe, earlier that day. This is Rudy Giuliani.
Oh my goodness. How the mighty have fallen.
I wonder what this kook has to say.
Oh no.
So let's have trial by combat.
Tonight, the president has.
Okay. That was what Rudy Giuliani had to say the day of. Now, get some real. You could stop the screen share now.
Yeah.
So,
Falcone, why don't you start? Why don't you start us off?
Yeah,
Falcone?
go ahead.
Yeah.
So literally, you come out, literally, Rudy comes out to come and say, let's have trial by combat after literally 4 people died for a lost cause
This was
that literally was going to get them nowhere. For literally BS conspiracy theories on election fraud, when literally they knew this whole time that literally their whole thing was fake. They lost almost every lawsuit in court. You had your day in court. You went through all the legal means, even your own appointed Supreme Court justices literally were literally all six all of them literally voted against literally overturning the election. Literally, this coup attempt literally was going to be their last stand to overturn the election. And literally in Congress, when they had to vote for the certification of the result, literally all 3 of my representatives voted to overturn the election in West Virginia. This is basically just crazy. The craziest thing I ever seen in my life. And this is like the first coup attempt I ever seen in my life.
Here at home, anyway.
14. Yeah.
Here at home, anyhow. But, you know, the one thing that I'm worried about, I mean, I agree with everything you said in that, you know, all of the court cases were thrown out, dismissed. There was not found to be any legitimate grounds to it. But remember back, you may not remember back to 2000 when it was Al Gore and Bush, and there were calls for, I mean, there is a legitimate provision in the law to allow people to challenge the results of elections. Now, you want those to be based on facts. You want those to be, you know, have people stand on some kind of solid ground with it. But I'm very afraid that in the backlash to what happened, that some of the things that are legal and that can be done in the face of an election will be made illegal because of this extreme situation. So, I mean, I do think it's important, like, I think it's important that there's not an overreaction in terms of people being able to protest. I think it's important that there's not an overreaction. And I don't mean in terms of how the people are handled who are participating in these protests. I mean, in more increased presence of police in terms of taking away people's right to challenge an election, more corporate censorship of what people have to say about these things. I'm just concerned that will be, that those of us who have been protesting for years or those who are coming up who want to protest now will have a chilling effect on all of that.
I think Madelyn makes a really good case, but here's where, you know, the work that we're doing at DLF really comes into play, as well as other groups on the ground. Every objection that they had put forward, whether, you know, we know it was not true, but every objection was at a local level. And this is where local civics really comes into play, because over 66 lawsuits, these were Trump appointed judges, and they all centered around the local clerk, 90% of whom were Republicans who are elected to that position. And in each one of those counties, each one of those polling places, you have bipartisan. You can volunteer as a Democrat, Republican to be a poll watcher, an election judge, and afterwards be a ballot auditor. So all of these things are handled at the local level. And today I'm actually seeing people on the left saying, well, hey, they've got a good point. And my pushback is, do you not understand how your own elections work? Have you ever volunteered? Do you know how the rules are? Have you seen the literature that's handed to the election judges? But before we get into that discussion, I really have a criticism of Rudy here, because
yes,
he
please.
Here is someone who is absolutely culpable. And if anyone is going to be indicted for insurrection and treason, he should be, because there was a premeditation on his part. Number one, he is a lawyer and has served in that capacity for a number of years. So here's where you saw that it was premeditated on his part. When he did his national tour to promote these false ideas, number one, he characterized it in a way that was sort of sounded like it could be true, but absolutely wasn't. And what you will note from state to state to state, he refused to take an oath, absolutely refused to take an oath. So that is your first clue that Rudy knew he was lying. And every time you went through the court cases, each and every one, most of them again were Trump appointed judges. All of those transcripts are readily available under the First Amendment. Anybody can go and get a copy of those transcripts. Did they tell anybody? No. In fact, there were very few media outlets who were pulling those transcripts. And you could see over and over and over again the difference between Rudy standing in front of his supporters lying with no culpability, as opposed to an attorney standing in front of a judge. And when a judge asks you, do you have evidence? Then your answer better be yes or no. And here it is, judge. So if you don't have it and you lie to a judge, you are going to jail. You will lose your license to practice law. They knew that, and we saw that case after case after case. They all said, no, Your Honor, I don't have the evidence. No, we don't have the proof. But you had Giuliani out there without taking an oath, because he knows what that means, with some fancy letterhead putting this off on people. And this is really part of the tragedy that we need to talk about this week. Is not just that we have these people in power who are so greedy and hungry for that power, but we have an entire population here in this country who doesn't understand basic civics. They don't understand how elections work. They don't know where to get the information. They don't know how to ask the right questions or to trust or whatever else. And then we have to have that economic discussion about what pushes good, hardworking people to start following someone like this. We've seen this time and time again throughout history. Yes, and that's exactly it. We see over and over again when people are paid a livable wage, crime goes down. It goes down across the board.
That's what I was saying earlier.
So and these are the conversations we need to have. Now, I'm not a fan of UBI without a price floor, but I am a fan of the federal jobs guarantee, because as we've seen over and over again, the Phillips curve is a lie. And the Phillips curve, promoted by Pelosi and everybody on the right, says that we have to have a 3% unemployment for a healthy economy. And now we know that's bullshit. It is zero. Yeah. We need no one unemployed.
100%.
And we can decide what that work looks like.
Unfortunately, there are no laws against lying to the public, There are laws in a courtroom about lying. There are laws and there are constitutional prohibitions against inciting to violence and inciting to riot and so on. But there, unfortunately, if we punished every politician who went out there and lied, we'd be, maybe we should. Maybe we need to start all over again. That's one reason why I'm agreeing, because I don't think Democrats or Republicans, for a whole variety of reasons, represent us properly. But yeah, Rudy Giuliani, until that speech in front of the Capitol steps where he said, let's have trial for combat, he was working people up. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about demagogues, as a result of Wednesday. And, Donald Trump is a demagogue. Adolf Hitler was a demagogue. People who are neo-Nazis follow demagogues. We need education for people so that they don't follow demagogues without thinking. And then we also need, conditions, living conditions. When I said UBI, Kerri, I was referring to, this $600 stimulus check that just came through for 7 or 8
it's technically
months.
UBI.
Yeah, for 7 or 8 months, and it's like $85 a month for your rent. that's been accumulating for 7 months, it's not going anywhere. So just, for a period of time, an adequate amount of money in people's pockets to get us through the pandemic, but the jobs are more important than that. Ultimately, the jobs are more important than that money. But anyway, I see Falcone wanting to say something.
Oh, so I remember this literally looking at this, like, how come like nobody was like, why couldn't people be angry at literally our government not actually helping us or giving us actual aid? But literally, I remember I was seeing this US democracy compared to the USSR's democracy, where literally when it comes to candidates who basically don't follow or do what they said they promised to their constituents, in the USSR, their constituents can vote to literally unelect them, really. Basically remove them
Like a
from
recall?
the yeah, basically recall their representative.
Or a
But
vote
in
of
the
no
United States,
confidence.
you can't even get recalled. You're basically literally like you're untouchable, but until literally the next election.
Well, and even then, I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
I want to get to 100.
Oh, yeah.
I think Rudy Giuliani is insane. I think that he's really lost it since he's been.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that he's had been in the right mind for a long, long time now. He used to be respected by a lot of different people. I don't think you could say that about him anymore. For whatever reason,
I think he's desperate. I think he's desperate. I think he's looking at some serious charges even before all of this happened. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and then you saw a lot of defections around Trump and his cabinet, and people were saying, some people were saying, oh, they finally saw the light, and then other people are saying, why did it take so long? And still others are saying they don't want to have to vote on the 25th Amendment. They don't want to be on the spot.
It's personal interest. They're only backing away for their own safety, for their own self. But I want to get back to anybody who incited violence on this, anybody who continued to object on the Senate floor after what happened, or who poured gasoline on the flames, should be held accountable. I think some of them need to actually be removed from Congress. I think that we need to start looking at who needs to go. Or at least who needs to, if we can't get rid of them, we need to strip them of all their committee assignments. They need to, like, for example, we're going to take a look at a video now from Matt Gaetz and Ted Cruz. And these two, I think, are also, well, I think Matt Gaetz is a little bit crazy, but we're going to take a look at, if we can pull up from Group A video 3. We're going to start pulling that up, and we're going to take a look.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, yes.
Here we go.
Another important point for the country is that this morning, President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful. He was far more, you can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit about his calls for peace than some of the BLM and left-wing rioters were this summer when we saw violence sweep across this nation. Now, we came here of the objection.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes without objection.
Madam Speaker, one of the first things we did when the House convened today was to join together to extend our grace and our kindness and our concern for a colleague who has experienced just an insurmountable amount of grief with his family. And I want all of our fellow Americans watching to know that we did that because we care about each other and we don't want bad things to happen to each other. And our heart hurts when they're due. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of folks over there who don't like me too much, and there are a few of you that I don't care for too much. But if anybody had been hurt today, it would have been even more of a catastrophe than we already saw. And I think that's an important point for the country. Another important point for the country is that this morning, President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful. He was far more, you can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit about his calls for peace than some of the BLM and left-wing rioters were this summer when we saw violence sweep across this nation. Now, we came here today to debate, to follow regular order, to offer an objection, to follow a process that is expressly contemplated in our Constitution. And for doing that, we got called a bunch of seditious traitors. Now, not since 1985 has a Republican president been sworn in, absent some Democrat effort, to object to the electors. But when we do it, it is the new violation of all norms. And when those things are said, people get angry. Now, I know there are many countries where political violence may be necessary, but America is not one such country. Madam Speaker, it was wrong when people vandalized and defaced your home. It was wrong when thugs went to Senator Hawley's home. And I don't know if the reports are true, but the Washington Times has just reported some pretty compelling evidence from a facial recognition company showing that some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters and, in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa. Now, we should seek to build America up, not tear her down and destroy her. And I am sure glad that at least for one day,
Kerri?
I didn't hear my Democrat colleagues calling to defund the police.
Looks like we lost Kerri
Now,
here.
I appreciate all the talk.
At least for the moment. She may.
Did you say anything before she left?
Now, I appreciate all the talk of coming together, but let us not pretend that our colleagues on the left have been free of some anti-democratic impulses just because we signed on to legal briefs and asked courts to resolve disputes.
Oh my God,
there were some on the left who said that we should not even be seated in the body, that we ought to be prosecuted, maybe even jailed. Those arguments anger people, but people do understand the concepts of basic fairness. And no competition, contest, or election can be deemed fair if the participants are subject to different rules. Baseball teams that cheat and steal signs should be stripped of their championships. Russian Olympians who cheat and use steroids should be stripped of their medals, and states that do not run clean elections should be stripped of their electors. This fraud
let me do something.
Was systemic. It was repeated. It was the same system, and I dare say it was effective. We saw circumstances where when Democrat operatives couldn't get the outcomes they wanted in state legislators, when they couldn't get the job done there, they went and pressured and litigated and usurped the Constitution with extra constitutional action of some officials in some states. They fraudulently laundered ballots, votes, voter registration forms, and then they limited review. In 2016, Democrats found out that they couldn't beat Donald Trump at the ballot box with voters who actually show up, so they turned to impeachment and the witness box. And when that failed, they ran to the mailbox, where this election saw an unprecedented amount of votes that could not be authenticated with true ID, with true signature match, and with true confidence for the American people. Our Article III courts have failed by not holding evidentiary hearings to weigh the evidence. We should not join in that failure. We should vindicate the rights of states. We should vindicate the subpoenas in Arizona that have been issued to get a hold of these voting machines, and we should reject these electors. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose is the general...
Mr. President.
Senator.
We gathered together at a moment of great division, at a moment of great passion. We have seen, and no doubt will continue to see, a great deal of moralizing from both sides of the aisle.
Really?
But I would urge to both sides perhaps a bit less certitude and a bit more recognition that we are gathered at a time when democracy is in crisis. Recent polling shows that 39% of Americans believe the election that just occurred, quote, was rigged.
It wasn't.
You may not agree with that assessment.
Because you guys tried to rig
But it
it.
is nonetheless a reality for nearly half the country.
39% of those polled.
I would
okay?
note it is not just Republicans who
Not
believe
of
that.
Americans.
31% of independents agree with that statement. 17% of Democrats believe the election was rigged. Even if you do not share that conviction, it is the responsibility, I believe, of this office to acknowledge that is a profound threat to this country and to the legitimacy of any administrations that will come in the future. I want to take a moment to speak to my Democratic colleagues.
I want to address Matt Gaetz
I understand.
first, and then Ted Cruz.
Your guy is winning right now. If Democrats vote as a bloc, Joe Biden will almost certainly be certified as the next president of the United States.
I want to get to address Matt Gaetz before we address Ted Cruz. Okay. So Matt Gaetz there accuses the protesters of being from Black Lives Matter and Antifa. I think that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. There's no way that's what they were. Those were angry Trump supporters. That may not represent his entire base, but that was a portion of his base. And that portion of his base is extremely unstable, extremely criminal, apparently. Now, they cannot just put it on other people. This is what base. And by objecting to the election, these are the people that they're trying to get to vote for them in their next election, or these are the people they're trying to fundraise off of with this grift they're going with. They're trying to fundraise. A lot of them have been doing fundraising emails and fundraising of all kinds. I mean, Josh Hawley, when he started objecting, he started doing fundraising. The second he started objecting, that's what he did. He used it to do fundraising. Oh, Kerri, you're muted. He used it to do fun. Well, 100%, they all have been using this for fundraising. And some of them, like Josh Hawley and possibly Ted Cruz, want to run in 2024. And they want to use this to win the Republican primary and get some of these people who are really crazy, this part of the base, in order they want them to vote for them. And they think by objecting to the election, they're going to get these votes. I think that Matt Gaetz, Josh Hawley, who we're going to take a look at in a little while, Ted Cruz, I think they need to be removed from their positions. I think they need to be stripped of their committee assignments. This is not acceptable. The election was not rigged. All they're doing is pouring gasoline on the fire. They're adding fuel to the fire. This is not acceptable. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay.
Does anyone object if I answer this, or do you want to go first, Falcone?
Oh,
go ahead.
Can go if you want. All right. So literally, my own dad believes that there was literally some people from Antifa that were there. And the same source that he uses, literally the Washington Times, has been proven to literally have tons of white supremacists on their news site, and was made by a North Korean defector who was a cult leader from the Moonies. But literally, there has been no evidence of any Antifa over there. Like, where's Antifa there? Like, I don't see no Antifa. And literally, some of my friends are actually fans of Antifa. Like, their nickname is Fantifa. But literally, like, where's your evidence for this? Like, all your lawsuits have been kicked out of court. You guys look like fools right now, because literally there is no evidence that actually agrees with that actually supports your own statement.
Hang on. To be fair to them, they got 200 votes overturned in one of their lawsuits.
Oh yeah.
I mean, again, there's no law against lying and in a public forum, and there's no law against filing lawsuits and losing. The problem is when you turn it around and, as you keep saying, Shane, to fan the flames of, and to to try to overthrow. Not see that, but this isn't overthrowing a government in the sense because the Biden administration isn't in there yet. It's trying to keep the person in power who wants to maintain power. And so this is a true definition of, you know, a tin pot dictator who wants to keep his power, and this is how he's trying to do it. But the fact that we're at a point where both sides are saying the same thing during the BLM protests, you know, a lot of people were saying that violence was caused by plants, people from the outside coming in to make the Black Lives Matter protesters look bad. And I believe that to be true. So it can happen. I don't know. I guess where I'm going is that we can't trust our politics at all. We can't trust our politics. We can't trust our politicians. We can't trust our institutions. We can't trust anything. And that's really, that puts us in a position of trying to create something else. Oh, and Antifa is not an organization.
Yeah.
Antifa are people who are fighting fascism. But the question is, okay, you got the Donald Trump brand of fascism, and then you got Democratic Party, Republican Party, pro-war, take money away from the people, put it into war, kind of whatever that is. There's how do we define the difference? That's my.
Well,
that's
I
been my
think in
challenge.
this case, I'm going to push back a little bit. Facts matter, right? So I have seen, and I've talked to a number of people who are still Trump supporters or who were Trump supporters, and they did come up with the Antifa thing because part and parcel to the way that they are being manipulated, you need to have a boogeyman. And it went from illegal immigration to now Antifa. And here we saw, what was it, Representative Mo Brooks didn't understand that Antifa was anti-fascist and was calling them Antifa fascists. So here is where education is once again could head off all of this. But I'm going to push back on the Black Lives Matter, because when we were talking about there were infiltrators there, we were right. And I am going to forward all of these articles and arrest records and now trials that are coming up for the Boogaloo Boys and the white supremacists who were doing that. The one gentleman dubbed the Umbrella Man, white supremacist. Another guy was arrested creating pipe bombs on his way to the next Black Lives Matter. So
I don't disagree with that.
This is not, these two arguments are not equal.
I wasn't trying to say that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It came out that way, and it's not you I'm addressing. That is the exact same argument that the MAGA folks are making. That it was, you know, all the Black Lives Matter and where were the arrests? So I pulled all the arrest records. In Portland alone, there were 500 arrests, over 500 arrests. In Seattle, there were 675 arrests. Now, the rest where they did not hold and the charges were dropped, you know, when we saw the wall of moms and the grandmas and the veterans, if they did not do any damage or vandalize anything, because there we know that the arrests were made to diffuse the crowd, not necessarily somebody did something wrong. Those charges were dropped. The rest of them are now going to court and facing fines. So when we saw Matt Getz and, you know, everyone else who stood up and said Black Lives Matter, this and this, here again is where Google is your friend and it's still free. If I can find this stuff in less than 2 minutes, so can anyone else. The arrest records are there, all the reporting is there. And this is where we need to take better responsibility. But Madelyn, to your point, I have to agree, because we had Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer stand on national TV and talk about how it's perfectly acceptable for them to rig primaries, that they somehow own the primary. And things like that matter. And here it is, it's come home to roost, because you're right. There are so many people who don't have faith in the electoral system. And here, I've often argued in Iraq, where you had a war going on, you had 82% voter turnout. Here, we're lucky if we can get 40 or 50 on a good day.
Well,
and it goes to that point. Absolutely.
Well, and it's funny, not funny, but ironic, because in New Jersey we had somewhere between 72 and 78% voter participation this year, or last year, this past election cycle, and that most voting was done by mail. So we were faced with, on the one hand, people using vote by mail for their own purposes to say, how can you trust vote by mail? And then on the other hand, you have a response by the electorate to vote by mail, which makes me want it to be the way of life, because, who wouldn't argue, who would disagree with 72 to 78% voter participation? There's something very healthy about that. And being able to vote, go to a safe box and put your ballot in at 10 o'clock at night, not having to squeeze in the time to go to a voting booth on election day. You do it at your leisure, and you can, there's a lot of positives about that. So we've got it being used in totally different ways by side that wants grassroots democracy and says that's a good thing, and the other side that says things are rigged. And yeah, we know that the Democratic Party primary was rigged. We know that. Anybody who supported Bernie Sanders saw it 2 election cycles, 4 years apart. Saw how,
not just Bernie Sanders, but Tulsi. Now, I was not a fan of Tulsi, but dear God, she passed the threshold to be on the debate stage. Right. So all of those things really matter when it comes to embracing our democracy. So one of the things I think we could do is get away from this whole idea that the RNC and the DNC somehow own the primary system. They do not. In fact, when all of our public money is used to finance a primary, 2 private corporations cannot lay claim to it. And we've got to do away with that. And I think that is going to go a long way towards, Shane, you and I had a conversation about ranked choice voting. So all of these things, valid.
The Democratic primary race, when we talked about that on the last show, I think it was last week, we talked about how they're going to be using ranked choice voting in the Democratic primary for the mayoral race. That's the first time they're using it here. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think they need to use it in the general. I think they need to use it in all elections going forward.
Way back in 1996, I was Ralph Nader's vice presidential running mate in New Jersey when he first ran with the Green Party. And he said right then and there, he said, stop voting for the lesser of 2 evils, because you're still voting for evil, and the evil becomes lesser and lesser. And I took that to heart, and that's where ranked choice voting could come in to sort of open that up. But it was 1996 he said that. And we didn't change anything at the federal level with the presidential elections. We changed nothing. 2016, we had Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, the 2 presidential candidates with the lowest approval ratings in history. So 20 years, this is where we went. Said, Ralph Nader was proven correct. Just look at the candidates. Look where we are. And then there was 2020, which was, I don't want to even talk about 2020 at this point. That's what we're talking about now. That's what we're in the middle of.
I want to take a look at someone's response. I went through a couple different responses with some people behind the scenes, and we picked out one response that we thought was really good to what happened yesterday. We picked out Jesse Ventura's response to what happened yesterday. We're going to take a look at that from his Twitter feed, if we can. And I thought he had an interesting response to what happened yesterday. On Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah. It feels like yesterday, right?
It really does. And we've been, we're going to take a look at the response from his Twitter. I think he actually nailed the response on this one. That's why we ended up picking this response. So If we could take a look at those. This is.
Oh, yes.
When I joined, he says, when I joined the military, I took an oath to defend my country against all threats, foreign and domestic. These are seditionists. These are domestic enemies. These are the same people refusing to wear masks because they feel it's their right to spread coronavirus. That's the first part of his response. Now we're going to take a look at the next few parts of his responses. He says, it's been so obvious that the tear gas, rubber bullets, and police brutality are reserved for only Black people and Black Lives Matter protesters. Today is case in point. From now on, I will refer to the Republican Party as the Jim Crow Party. And we're going to continue from there.
Absolutely.
Republicans only care about suppressing Black votes. And their outright bigotry led to exactly this. I hope Mitch McConnell and all those Republican senators who wouldn't impeach Trump are proud of themselves. This is their fault too. If they had just impeached Trump, scroll down a little bit, like they should have, then we wouldn't be seeing this today. So I suppose the Republican Party is happy. They clearly got what they wanted. What other outcome could they possibly expect? And we got to go to the last one. This mob of seditionists need to be arrested, including the chicken hawk hiding in the White House, who instigated it all. I've had it. I'm done. I'm beyond angry. I've had enough of the polarization of these two parties and their dictatorship. Look where it's gotten us. And I picked that response for a number of reasons. It calls out what the Republicans did. It calls out the two-party system. And I thought it was a very strong response to what happened yesterday. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And when I was listening to you read his comments, it is amazing to me. And as we were going through the Black Lives Matter protests, and even before that, we have to point out that what we are fighting for is due process and equal protection. These two rights are supposed to be guaranteed to every citizen. And they're so important that they're the only ones listed twice in the Bill of Rights. And no matter how hard we were trying to make that case, our friends and neighbors who were on the far right didn't want to hear it. And it was a point where you had to stop being in denial why they weren't listening. It had nothing to do with right or wrong, law and order or justice, none of that. It was a very based reaction from racism and otherism. And we can clearly see that in the night before, leading up into the storming of the Capitol, when they themselves were facing pushback from the police. They were so incredulous to it and couldn't believe it. And you see them heartbroken now burning their Blue Lives Matter flags. We thought you would let us pass unimpeded because we're white. This is
with the audio here. I'm going to have to check the stream. Somebody's informing me here that we're having an issue with the audio, so I'm going to be checking the stream now. I apologize for the interruption.
Oh yeah, I'll check the stream as well.
Would let us pass unimpeded because we're white.
Why is there singing? They're singing on the stream that I've been checking. Who is I don't know where that's coming from. Leonard, if you can deal with that. If you're streaming and that's you on there, because it's picking up your mic, and gonna stop that, please.
This is
with the audio here. Yeah, I'm still hearing it on this. Leonard, if you can. Okay, is everybody seeing that it's gone from the stream? Let's get you. Deal with that. Looks like it's gone. I'm not sure. Might have been picking up your mic. The person streaming's mic might have been being picked up. Apologize, everybody, for the issue there.
You picked it up.
It looks like it's gone now.
You caught it early. That's a good thing, Shane. It's a good thing.
Definitely. I think it might have picked up his mic. You're not muted if on the stream for whatever reason. Okay, if you can continue, Kerri. Sorry about that.
No, it was just, I think Jesse made the point very clearly. It was, when it comes to all the arguments and the pretense, I think that particularly Brandon on our network likes to dispel this myth that they're trying to engage in any kind of conversation. A lot of it is just deflection. It's deflection because we, particularly in the center and the left, use thought and reason. And so they put up obstacles in our way, like we are patriots, Blue Lives Matter, all of these things to get us spun around on these illogical arguments, when in reality, what they are doing is completely driven by emotion, right? Racism, it has no logical foundation. It's purely emotion. So it's anger, hatred, self-doubt, cowardice, all of these negative things pushing them forward. And we saw this, and Jesse's right, it's completely Jim Crow. So, and it's not just the Republicans. Joe Manchin is another one. After all of this happened, after everything came down and all of these things that happened, he came out the very next day and said, no, I'm going to vote against stimulus checks because screw you and your families. And I got to tell you, from my own personal, my dad right now is suffering from COVID. And as soon as I am done here, I need to go check on him and make sure he doesn't need to go to the emergency room again. So I have a very personal interest, and I am but one of 350,000 families.
Well, and
it's unconscionable.
It is unconscionable, and it's been going on since the beginning of this year or last year. And like I was mentioning earlier, the reason that there were a group of us out in front of the offices of Senator Booker and Senator Menendez is that the two of them stopped the filibuster that would have forced a vote on increasing the stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000. That vote hasn't happened in the Senate. It happened in the House, but it hasn't happened in the Senate. And, you know, as we said earlier too, if things had been happening along the way to make sure that, like, let's say instead of a minimum wage, there was a living wage. Let's say there was tuition-free college. Let's say people's debts were forgiven. Let's say nobody was worrying about being pushed out, evicted because they have 7 or 8 months worth of rent that's due, or, you know, mortgage that's due. If a lot of those things had been taken care of, and that's what people said about Nazi Germany many years ago. You know, the way that the powers dealt with Nazi Germany after World War I was to strip them of everything. You know, strip them of anything that could enable them to recover economically. Sure, I know there's more, and I know that the rhetoric, as you were talking about it, and it's not only rhetoric, people have lived it out. But would that fly? Would that work? Would that move people to do what was done on Wednesday if people's lives were better, if their basic needs, more of their basic needs were met? And that's why I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I am a Green, and because I don't think, and it's as hard as it is, as difficult as it was to run as a Green at any time, let alone during COVID, the kinds of, you know, the healthcare issues, the issues of taking the coronavirus seriously, all of that had to be addressed.
It was a point where
and the economic issues are right there on top of it. The military, the economic, the climate issues, and so on. And no one in those two parties with their big wealthy donors, you know, is taking any of that seriously enough.
Right.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, Falcone, if you have anything to say, and then we're going to take a look at somebody else who fanned the flames a little bit.
So literally, our democracy is basically fake. Like, we have no real democracy here. It's only controlled by basically one party, the corporate party, where literally Emma Goldman said it the best. she said literally, if we could get change through voting, they would have to make it illegal. They would have to make voting illegal. Literally,
I've heard that for a while.
literally, every time, literally, next, this was basically the most craziest day ever. This was like the most craziest day ever, where literally you have our own politicians basically feeding into this whole like election fraud conspiracy theory to undermine what democracy we actually have, which literally, like, we have no justice in this country. Jesse Ventura said it the best. Like, we can't even get literally, we can't even get justice for basically George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. There's no justice in this country. Our country is not made to give justice to anybody or literally help its people. Literally, you have the two horrible senators from New Jersey basically filibustering $2,000 checks. Why can't we get relief? Why couldn't people come out and go and protest and become angry and literally fight to force a vote on Medicare for all? Fight to actually get $2,000 stimulus checks that we all need. Literally, people are suffering now. But instead of actually helping us, they literally feed into this voter fraud conspiracy theory.
I want to point out, when we do try to fight, they will fight us harder. The Democratic Party, when anybody in the Democratic Party who's progressive tries to get something done, their own party will fight them harder than they will fight the Republican Party. The establishment of that party will fight you harder than the Republican. You saw what they did to Bernie. Had a flawed strategy in a way to get those stimulus checks passed. But when he actually had a shot of doing it, 41 Democrats voted with Mitch McConnell against him in order to stop him from doing what he was doing. And the Democratic Party establishment will fight their own, the progressive left in their party harder than they'll fight the Republican Party. They will work with the Republican Party before they'll let anybody on the progressive left do anything. And they'll work with them on the corporate tax
don't you
cuts.
think that's because, that's because they're Republicans. And this is a trend that we have seen for at least the last 15 years, when you have Republicans who decide to run as Democrats because it's politically viable in that district, and they get elected. Their policies haven't changed. And you're going to see this even more accelerated because the DNC elevated MAGA folks and gave them a profile if they would but denounce Trump. So you're seeing this celebrity coming out, and Dave Weissman out of Florida is one of them. I asked him, okay, so you're no longer a Trump supporter. What are your policies? Nothing has changed. He's just gone from blue to red. And this is nothing new. And part of it is us as voters. We are lazy when it comes to voting. We look at, oh, well, red or blue, and you can't possibly vote green because that's a wasted vote, right? So this is what we hear over and over again. We never have the policy discussion. And then once these people get here, like we saw, what was it? Josh Hawley threw a fit on Twitter because he said his First Amendment rights were violated because a private company canceled his book deal. And all of Twitter had to explain to a sitting senator what the First Amendment was. We put him in Congress.
Yes.
So a lot of this is on us, that we're not paying attention, and the Democratic Party has largely been taken over by Republicans. They've moved to the right. The rest of the country hasn't. And that's part of the problem.
Oh wait, I want to say here, we even our elected progressives that we also have, our quote unquote elected progressives, even agree with literally the Democrats and Republicans kind of on foreign policy. For example, AOC supports going into Venezuela. Literally, she said, I side with my own party leadership on Venezuela, saying that it's a failed state and it needs democracy. And then next, she supports literally trying to overthrow Daniel Ortega, a democratically elected socialist president, and took a picture with Bolivian fascists who are against Evo Morales, but then literally comes out on Twitter saying this is a coup, but she's just pandering.
Well, and you see, Joe Biden said it over and over and over again. He's not in favor of Medicare for all. He said it on debate after debate after debate. He said he's not in favor of a Green New Deal. He said it's not my Green New Deal. He said, he said more than once, nothing will fundamentally change here. You vote for me, nothing will fundamentally change. And I know, Kerri, I know many activists whom I've worked with over a long period of time saying, because of their fear of Donald Trump, that they had to vote for Joe Biden anyway. So then when he has a policy that they don't agree with, feign surprise. No, there's no surprise here. We knew it. You knew it when you voted for him. And that's, I think, another part of the dysfunctionality of our of our winner takes all electoral process. And also, it's a lot of hard work to build an alternative political party, a real one that can affect and influence policies. And I just throw this in 2020, my election had the most votes of any statewide candidate for U.S. Senate in New Jersey as a Green in our history. The only one person who got more votes statewide was in a presidential race, and that was Ralph Nader back in the year 2000. But it still was millions of votes behind Cory Booker. So, it's
right. And I just want to make a plug for, and this is gratuitous, I get this, but this is why we started DLF, because we want to give candidates a platform, right? We understand that the deck is stacked against candidates. If you're the anointed candidate in the Democratic or the Republican Party, you never need to want for media coverage. So this is why we decided that we are always going to cover independents, Greens, progressives, those types of things, because it's a policy discussion and we want to give a platform to people who want to run. So yeah, absolutely. To your point, the deck is stacked by design. And this is, again, where I believe education comes in, because if we could even get a small portion of the MAGA folks and get them educated on macroeconomics and how things really work, I am convinced without a doubt that we could get them, because I've seen it. I have done focus groups with Tea Party groups, with MAGA groups, and I'll set in front of them 10 progressive policies. And I have never left with less than 9 in total 100% agreement when they hear what it actually is.
Yeah. No.
So
get the labels out, get the rhetoric out, get the demagoguery out, and get to the facts, and a whole different matter. I agree.
Go to 2 different video graphics. One is very short, so we're going to start with this one. This is from Louis Gohmert pouring gasoline on the flame once again. This is from 1 month ago.
Been doing this for a while.
Clearly now Marjorie Taylor Greene makes him look smarter.
The first one.
Who does?
So this is Louis Gohmert from a month ago, what he was saying.
A month ago.
I could not find a video of him saying anything on video recently. A lot of it was Twitter.
We're coming down to the wire, and we have not had a proper job done by the Department of Justice, and certainly not by the FBI. And when I read that our Attorney General had said he had seen no evidence of fraud in this election, then I flashed back to meetings with Jeff Sessions and telling him about a case where we had a witness that had a stack of documents, some of which were lay-down felony cases. And he, in my presence, directed the FBI there at his office to go out and investigate. Well, they waited until the last minute, they ordered this witness, the FBI agents did, to come forward, but do not bring any of your documents. We're ordering her not to bring the evidence, and then turned around and told Attorney General Sessions she didn't have anything. There was nothing there. There's no case. There's no nothing. Well, that's what I was reminded of when I read that the Attorney General Barr had said. Look, it appears pretty obvious to some of us by now that Christopher Wray took his figurative instructions to clean up the FBI as instructions to sweep things under the carpet. He hasn't cleaned things up. And it may be that Attorney General Barr needs to stop using people like Durham or problems here in Washington, but get either FBI agents outside of Washington that can be trusted or use the U.S. Marshals that can be trusted. But there is evidence that's got to be gathered. We've been trying to bring this to the Justice Department's attention to do something to protect the integrity of the 2020 election. There was evidence of fraud in Dallas County in the 2018 primary and general election, and they did nothing. The Attorney General in Texas was apparently otherwise occupied when he should have been pursuing this, and then we didn't get any work out of this Justice Department. And so there's widespread evidence of fraud because people haven't done their jobs. Durham and Barr will deserve a big notation in history when it's written of the rise and fall of the United States if they don't clean up this mess, clean up the fraud, do your jobs, and save this little experiment in self-government. That's our challenge to the people at the top of the Justice Department.
Now,
thank you.
Before we say anything about Louis, we're going to go to the second video graphic at the 1 minute and 40-second mark. And this is just to
remember
show you
just how
guys who
stupid
Louis
he
Gohmert
is.
For those of you who don't know, we're going to go to the 1 minute and 40-second mark.
Enjoy.
This administration has so many Muslim Brotherhood members that have influence that they just are making wrong decisions for America. We've been battling this socialist health care, the nationalization of health care that is going to absolutely kill senior citizens. They'll put them on lists and force them to die early.
Thank you, dear God, for the gift of Andrew Breitbart. People have got to understand that we're serious about stopping the massive load we are putting on our children and their children. If you're oriented toward animals, bestiality, then you know that's not something that can be held against you, or any bias be held against you for that, which means you'd have to strike any laws against bestiality. If you're oriented toward corpses, toward children, you know, there are all kinds of perversions, what most of us would call perversions. Some would say it sounds like fun.
Tell us about the research.
You're attacking the messenger. Anderson, you're better than this. You used to be good. You used to find that there was a problem, and you would go after it.
Sir, I'm just asking you for evidence of something you said on the floor of the House.
Southern accent. I did, and you listen, this is a problem. If you had spent as much time looking into the problem as you have been trying to come after me and belittle me this week,
Sir, do you want to offer any evidence? I'm giving you an opportunity to say what research and evidence you have. You've offered none, other than yelling.
Do you ever look at your website? Do you ever look at your website? Do you?
Sure.
Because if you had, you would have...
I mean, I had one guy that was particularly out of line, and I warned him 3 times, and then we duct taped his head, and we didn't hear from him till it was his turn to talk. And
that's
then
when you were a judge?
That was when I was a judge of felony court.
That didn't go in your courtroom.
Well, you just had to, you gave him 3 warnings, made the record, and then wrapped him up.
We know Al-Qaeda has camps over with the drug cartels on the other side of the Mexican border. We know that people are now being trained to come in and act like Hispanic when they're radical Islamists. You won't be satisfied till I bring in someone who says, I'm a terrorist and you're right. I'll
take a legitimate former FBI agent who actually offers evidence. If you can present that person, let us know off camera. We'd be happy to talk to them off camera. But so far, you presented nothing.
FBI agent. I promised him I would not reveal his name.
Well, that's convenient.
You follow me around the world. You see me hugging Muslims around the world. Thank you, President Barack Hussein Obama. This will be quite a legacy for you. And I'm not one of those who says he's not a Christian. All I know is that's between him and God. But what I do know is he has helped jumpstart a new Ottoman Empire. I'm not going to debate the merits of whether we should or should not have gone to Vietnam. But what I will tell you is Vietnam was winnable, but people in Washington decided we would not win it.
Ultimately, they're saying you have to hire whatever Satan worshiper, whatever cross-dresser you think might be immoral, if that's against your religious belief. You are going to be forced to abandon your religious beliefs. And we've been seeing that with some of the requirements under Obamacare.
This administration seems to have a hard time recognizing members of terrorist groups who are allowed into the White House. You're aware of that happening, aren't you?
Absolutely not.
When you attack somebody's integrity and say they made statements that were not true, then of course that raises a point of personal privilege. But the Attorney General failed to answer my questions about what was
after what he went back to regular order, Mr. Chairman.
Aspersions on my asparagus.
The gentleman, Mr. Chairman.
Aspersions on my asparagus.
Mr. Chairman.
Aspersions on my asparagus.
The video there. That is one of the people who was questioning the election. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of these people who are questioning the election. That was a compilation put together by the Secular Talk Show that took from a few different other shows as well. But
Louis Gohmert makes John Boehner look like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Question this election. So I think that video kind of gets the point across.
I think so.
Oh my God. So, oh yeah, literally his Vietnam comment was so funny because here's the reason why South Vietnam was asking the United States to fight its war for them. Because literally all the majority of the people in South Vietnam supported the communists coming in to invade South Vietnam. Literally, the dude is so stupid. Literally, he talks about how there's literally Al-Qaeda bases at the Mexican border. Okay, if there was Al-Qaeda bases at the Mexican border, why aren't we getting attacked from the Mexican border? Like, the dude sounds the dude literally just sounds so fucking crazy. The dude literally looks like he's been drinking all that, what was it? All the One American News Network, Newsmax, Hysteria. The dude literally looks like he's been going into some crazy QAnon stuff. It's so weird. Literally, he's made now he looks like he's now making Marjorie Taylor Greene look smart. Oh my God.
I mean,
literally, who can trust anything what Louis Gohmert has to say? And I don't know why literally his own constituents in his district literally vote for him again and again and again and again.
The system protects him. He's an establishment figure, and the system will protect you even if you're insane like he is. I mean, we covered, I think, Kerri, you were here the last time I forgot, he was doing that ridiculous lawsuit, and that got shot down as well. And that time I only had the one video of him talking about duct taping people's heads in his courtroom when he was a judge. See, this is the kind of person who is basically just like Rudy Giuliani. They're out of their minds. They're talking about nonsense, and possibly when he was talking about duct taping somebody's head when he was a judge, that's illegal, and he said that on national TV. So there's something clearly mentally wrong with this guy.
And again, I mean, I don't like to be the person who's always saying this, but it's true. There's nothing illegal about ignorance. what, you know, and again, if people were, there's so much ignorance running through so many parts of our political system. The problem is when that ignorance meets demagoguery, and then it's used to inflame fires of rebellion, or not even rebellion is a too kind a word, insurrection, I guess, based on that ignorance. And that ignorance could be and is racial stereotypes and racism and white supremacy and such. And you know, it runs. That's why I'm glad you brought Jesse Ventura's tweets in, because it runs through both political parties and political establishments. And I just remember, and I guess maybe I, you know, my father used to say when I would call people crazy and stupid, he said, they're probably thinking the same thing about you at this very moment. And they put that in my head where, I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is when you use it to destroy, when you use it to harm, when you use it to break the law, when you use it to get people behind you to do things like what we saw on Wednesday. That's where it really becomes a problem.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I think Louis and Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley and Joe Manchin and all of these figures, they are symptoms of the larger problem. People keep voting for them. Why? And so we can peel back a little bit. Yes, it is heavily weighted for the incumbent. Yes, there is a huge political machine, but we had just over 435 progressives elected in this last cycle. Prior to that, it was 200. So they're beating the system, and the reason they're beating the system is
local levels in addition to Congress.
Yeah, in addition to Congress. So if you want to look at, you know, Marie Newman, so we're talking about local, state, and federal. And so I know it's easy and we're more comfortable to focus on the federal level. Where do you think these people come from? They're coming from the states. Josh Hawley is one of them, right? So we need to focus across the board, not just always up at the top. And when I'm talking about all of these people getting elected, they're getting elected because they're using a formula and a progressive strategy that works in a grassroots environment. We cannot use guerrilla warfare against the political machine. They wrote the rules. So we need to step back and look at engaging in the grassroots, talking to regular people, going outside. I mean, when I ran for office, we knocked on every door, which is completely against the original playbook. You only have so much time, so you would only knock on the doors of leaning Democrats or those likely to vote. No, I knocked on every door, and I had the conversation with my far right Republican neighbor, and that is where I moved the chain a little bit to get where I needed to be, right? And I'll tell you, by doing things like that, I scared the shit out of the Republicans that I was running against because I was doing things unconventional. And in the same token, you know, as we said with Louis, who's in there doing the work, talking to his district in Texas, who's trying to explain it to him, who's actually showing them that Louis is nothing but a grifter and he's been here forever, real nice guy. It's a hard lift. It's a hard task, but we've got to do that. And all of these people are symptoms of the larger problem. And we are always going to have this problem until we start having these real conversations and education and basic civics lessons with some of our neighbors.
And Kerri, you're absolutely right when you talk about policy. And one of the things we said over and over again in our Green Party campaign this time around, and we have been as Greens for a while, it's not about party, it's about policy. Vote for the policy, not the party. Get beyond, you know, these party labels. Look at what it is you want and you think will work and that you need.
Right.
And if we were to wait at the federal level, if we get 5 to 10 progressives at the federal level elected every year out of 535 seats, or 435 every 2 years,
Right.
435 and 33 in the Senate. We're going to be here till, the year 3000, waiting for the people in the Congress and the Senate and the House of Representatives to do what we want them to do. We don't have that time. We don't have that time to wait.
No, we've got 8 years. 8 years, according, if you believe in climate science.
Yeah.
8 years. That's it. So we keep, whenever I hear the conversation about, well, we're going to run so and so for president, I'm like, I don't give a shit. No, I don't care.
Take care of it now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, like, literally, my senator, Joe Manchin, literally, the dude is, like, just a horrible senator. So, in my state of West Virginia in the future in 2024, I'm going to run as a Green Party candidate for Board of Education.
Good.
Yeah. And basically, I want to break the two-party system in my state and basically try to get people to stop voting for these two corporate parties that are not going to try to represent you. They're only going to screw you over and over and over again. Literally, it's all about policy. It's not about, whether or not you roll up your sleeves well or something like that. Or, if you're not, or if you're a patriot enough or something like that. No, it's about policy. It's literally what's going to actually change people's and fix people's material conditions. For example, literally in West Virginia, we have like a big time history of activism. Here in West Virginia, we are treated as collateral damage, and our politicians don't represent us. So basically, the reason why West Virginia voted overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders in 2016 is because he appealed to them. That's why. And they voted for Trump because literally Trump appealed to them on policy. Both of them the voters felt like they can actually get somebody who represents them, which was Donald Trump or basically Bernie Sanders.
Let's all right, so we have to end this. We have one minute video of Josh Hawley, and then we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to end. So if you could go to group A, the last video. This is Josh Hawley's speech on the Senate floor. After the
and in this country, in the United States of America, we cannot say emphatically enough, violence is not how you achieve change. Violence is not how you achieve something better. Our Constitution was built and put into place so that there would be, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, no appeal from ballots to bullets. And that's why I submit to my colleagues that what we're doing here tonight is actually very important. Because for those who have concerns about the integrity of our elections, those who have concerns about what happened in November, this is the appropriate means. This is the lawful place where those objections and concerns should be heard. And I hope that this body will not miss the opportunity to take affirmative action to address the concerns of so many millions of Americans, to say to millions of Americans tonight that violence is never warranted, that violence will not be tolerated, that those who engage in it will be prosecuted, but that this body will act to address the concerns of all Americans across the country. We do need an investigation into irregularities, fraud. We do need a way forward together. We need election security reforms. I bet my friends on the other side of the aisle don't disagree with that.
So the first thing I want to point out is I love how Mitt Romney is like glaring at him the entire time. Like,
yes.
And Mitt Romney has a double mask on. Did you not see that? He had the N95 and then another mask over the top of that.
I love that. He's like glaring. He's like looking in his eyes. Like, really, after we just went through all that, you're still going to bring these claims here?
Yeah.
Thing is, I have no love for Josh Hawley, but I actually used to defend him a little bit on a couple of issues where I thought he was okay. After this, I'm not willing to defend him anymore. When he did the $1,200 checks, I'm like, that's a great thing. He did a couple issues that I agree. So I was like, all right, let me defend him. But I cannot defend someone who is going to try to overturn a presidential election on any issue ever again. I'm not willing to go to that route.
All right, do you? I gotta poke you a little bit on this one, Shane, because do you remember me saying exactly that? Yeah, I get that he's all for the greater check, but keep an eye on that guy because I saw this coming a mile away. The guy's a grifter. He's another grifter, and if you go back and look at his voting record in his prior office, same thing. So I cannot unsee Mitt Romney glaring at the back of his head. Or the reason I was laughing is because that was the same guy who was just a few hours later crying, literally crying giant fascist tears because he lost his book deal. So everything that you saw there was purely theatrics, performative. He didn't mean a damn word of it. And you could tell that he was so close to that payout, so close. And he lost it, and
it's gone.
So this is why I know that this is kind of a stretch, but when we were asking for force to vote for Medicare for all, and we had people on the left going, but why it won't pass? This is why, so that we can cut through the performance. Like every time we have a presidential election, the objections they happen. It goes on every time. It's all performative. What matters is the vote. So everyone who stood up there and said their piece one way or another, tune it all out. How did they vote? And that's what matters. So again, here was another example of that. And I would like to put this in front of my comrades here on the left and on the right who were calling for a Medicare for all vote, saying, but not yet. Yes. This is your example.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to push for it. I'm with you, Kerri. I mean, if it's necessary, we have to push for it. I don't care. This has been something that has been a theme in all of my activism going all the way back, where you'd have people say, you can't push for that because the legislature's not ready to go for that. And I'd say, I'm going to push for that because it's what we absolutely need. If they're not ready to go for it, we'll push them. But the time to push them is all the time, not, the people who said, well, let's get Biden in, get Trump out. Peace activists saying that. Let's get Trump out first, then we'll push Biden to the left, or we'll push to the left on Medicaid. You have the most leverage before an election, not
and
after.
And talking about the force to vote, I sent graphics to my producer. I want him to put up on the screen. They're not videos, they're just pictures. Okay. And this is something that one of my friends, he does a website called independentleft.news, and he
he's awesome. Go check him out, everybody.
Of all different people on the left. So I want to show you this graphic he put up. People were saying, we don't have the numbers to force the vote. And
multiple Republican senators still.
This is a graphic where you could have actually blocked Pelosi and you could have gotten a new speaker. This is the map that he gave. And Pelosi needs 214 votes to clear. They could have said 8 of them could have banded together and said, listen, this is a list of speakers that we're going to approve. Wow. We are going to not allow you to put Pelosi in. Now, go to the next graphic. These are some of the speakers that they should have accepted. Go to the next graphic. These are some of the speakers they could have expected. Go down and scroll down. This would have to be someone who agreed. This is what he argued. This is someone like Brandon. He said these are speakers we should have accepted because we could have got them possibly to give us the vote on Medicare for all. We could have gotten more in that deal. But 8 progressives had to band together and say, listen, we're not going to give Pelosi the 214 votes to clear. We're going to go back to caucus and we're going to vote there. These are the speakers that are acceptable. And we will block every other speaker except for somebody on this list. And they could have done that, and they chose not to.
Yeah, there's a couple of names on that list. I would say no way.
Yeah, Peter DeFazio,
I did not
kick him
make the
out.
list myself, but this is I didn't have time to take a couple names off that list. But
I mean, the operative word is if they banded together and they tried, they could have found somebody else, and that's not the specific names, but because I know people who defended them right and left, saying, well, who else emerged? Who else came up? Who else did you want? And this is really important stuff.
Someone would have emerged.
And if people, I think you've used the word, Kerri, tonight, If people weren't so lazy in their thinking about how these things proceed, could say, well, let's find somebody who will do what we want them to do, and we have the votes. And it's not like they haven't had the pressure. They've had pressure put on them as well.
100%. But I'm going to end with what happened on the 6th of January is going to be probably remembered as one of the darkest days in American history. It should never have been able to happen. They never should have been able to get through. They were unprepared. They knew something was possibly going to happen. Trump had rallied up his people. And I didn't realize this, but when Bernie Sanders always says Trump is one of the most dangerous presidents in American history, I thought he was exaggerating. But the reason he's dangerous is not because he starts illegal wars. It's not because of the normal. It's because of what he riles up in people and what he's able to inspire in some of the more dangerous supporters on the right. So I actually think in some ways Bernie was right about him being one of the most dangerous president. Not for the same reasons as everybody else, though.
Oh, yeah.
I think actually the darker day is coming. We have seen the militia now respond. And they have already said that they are on their way on the 19th and 20th to stop the actual inauguration. So we'll see if the FBI, Homeland Security, DHS under Chad Wolf, who is still serving illegally right now, we'll see if any of those people decide to remember what their job actually is and really head this off. Otherwise, what you're going to see is what happened on the 6th, but this time more heavily armed.
Yeah, and in the name of fighting fascism, you don't want to be, being anti. This administration may become very fascist as well. You have to be careful. But I know. Sorry, Falcone. I know you want to say something.
All right. So when it came to force the vote, you had all these people who call themselves communists or socialists or quote unquote anarchists, like BreadTube or like Vosh or these other people from the boutique left who are telling you to wait. Oh, it's not the right time yet to force the vote on Medicare for all. When is the time? The time is freaking now to force the vote. Literally. Already literally, I think 17 million people already lost their freaking health care. You're telling us to wait for that shit? No, we shouldn't be fucking waiting for anything. Literally, you guys were telling us to vote for fucking Joe Biden. Joe Biden, a fucking war criminal who should be in jail right now? Yeah, no. This is literally one of the ways you could push him left by trying to force him to sign Medicare for all if this passed in the Senate and the House. Literally, it's so stupid how they tell us that, oh, we have to wait. Oh, we gotta get out Trump. He's a fascist. When has fascism ever gotten elected? Hitler wasn't elected. He was appointed chancellor. Mussolini wasn't elected. He was appointed. Franco, he wasn't elected. He won a civil war. That's how he won. That's how he got to be the dictator of Spain. The leader of Japan, the emperor of Japan at the time, was not elected. He was appointed there by his own dynasty. Like, literally, to everybody who to everybody who was telling us to wait, literally, nobody should listen to all the people who were telling us to wait and that we can't force a vote on Medicare for all. They are fakes and they're phonies that nobody should take seriously at all.
Right. And I thought we should go further. Like I said, I thought we had the numbers to force a new speaker. I think if we're going to go for forcing something, we should not go in small and just ask for Medicare for all. We should say, listen, we want a new speaker, we want Medicare for all, and we want all those other concessions, the smaller concessions that we actually got this time around. We want this, we want this, and we want this. And unless you give it to us, we're going to block every single speaker who is not approved, and we're going to block. We had the numbers. The thing is, we needed a leader. Nobody was willing to step up and lead. We don't have any progressives. There are plenty of progressives and so-called progressives and like more like moderate progressives, but none of them are leaders who are in Congress right now. None of them have the courage to be leaders.
What's the courage? They don't want to offend or ruin, quote unquote, ruin their careers by by speaking out on the wrong things in the wrong way at the wrong time. They're playing the game. You know, they may go a little further some days, but when it comes right down to it, it's the money, it's the donors, it's the, you know, it's that which kind of influences what people are going to do or not do. I've had a lot of respect for the squad and people who try to push the envelope, but I am with you that the courage is lacking at the important times. Self-serving. That's what you were saying about Louis Gohmert and saying about Josh Hawley. It's all self-serving, and that's not what politics should be about, in my opinion.
70 representatives in the House, if I'm not mistaken, who voted to try to overturn Pennsylvania. There was about 6 senators who tried to do that. All of them were trying to circumvent our democracy with zero evidence of voter fraud. They all, in my opinion, they all should be removed from office or at least stripped of their committee assignments. They don't deserve to have any power, especially after what they've done.
Well, Shane, I really appreciate this opportunity. I love being on your program, love supporting everything. And it's always great to meet all of these wonderful guests that you have on. I am so, first off, what did you call them? Boutique liberals?
Oh, the boutique left. Basically, like Richard M.
I love that.
Me too.
I love it, and I'm stealing it. So,
oh, yeah.
I've never heard that before either.
I guess if you guys are ready, we could stop the stream.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, we're ready to stop the stream.
My voice is giving out.